Greetings and welcome to the Comics Coffee Metal Podcast. I'm your host, Don Cardenas, and today I'm joined by two fantastically talented gentlemen who I've had the pleasure of one meeting just right now, and the other one who I've known online for quite a while and have met at C2E2 in person, which seems like an increasingly rare thing these days. But yeah, I'm super stoked to have them on. They have a really awesome new Kickstarter out called CAMERAMAN, and it looks really fun, and we're going to get all into that. But first and foremost, let's welcome to the show Andrew Leamon, Xander Arnot. Gentlemen, thank you for coming on.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks so much. Really appreciate it.
As we kind of mentioned before recording and all that, I'm glad I was able to I had the opening at the right time for you guys for the Kickstarter and all that, because I've known Andrew I don't know exactly when we first connected on social media at some point.
Oh, it's been years, I feel like.
Yeah, it's been years, it's been decades probably at this point.
Probably.
But yeah, it's just seems like forever, but I think we finally met in person for the first time this year, unless we did before and I'm forgetting, but no.
No, it always, the timing never worked out where like I would go by your booth at the con and you would not happen to be there, or I'd be like, oh, I'm about to go, and then the con floor would close. So then it was just, the timing just never worked out, but.
Yeah, well, I'm glad it worked out this year, and I'm glad you're on. And Xander, just our brief chat, before the show, you're definitely my type of guy here, and so without me rambling on too much, let's get to it, guys. Comics, coffee, metal. What are you digging right now? Let's start with Andrew.
Yeah, so let's start with comics. My big comic, I would say it's pretty much my personality at this point, is Chainsaw Man by Tatsuki Fujimoto. I'm just obsessed with it. I came to it pretty late from before part 2 debuted, but it's just been like a long time. Just ever since then, I've just been absolutely obsessed with it, and I've tried to get friends into it, and that's just I'm obsessed with it. Also reading, I just got, even right by me now, Deep Cuts by Joe Clark, Kyle Higgins, and then there's like a whole bunch of awesome comic creators, Helena Masalis, Ramon Perez, Junji Ba, all beautiful, wonderful artists. And then the new Spectacular Spider-Man series by Greg Weisman and Humberto Ramos. I've been digging it. It's pretty good. I don't read a lot of Marvel comics like every single day, so when I dabble, I'm enjoying myself. And let's see. Then for coffee, so I don't drink coffee. I haven't had a cup of coffee since, I think the last time I was dared to on a date in college, because she found out that I had never drank coffee before that. So. Yeah, and I tried a latte.
So you're one and done.
And it was it was an awesome coffee shop, and of course I'm blanking on the name of it. Third Coast in Kalamazoo, Michigan, an awesome coffee shop. I believe it's.
What did you get? What was the?
It was just a latte with foam on top. It smelled good, but then as soon as I drank it, I was like, oh, this is coffee. This is coffee. Yeah. So when I was a little boy, my grandma, she was a big coffee drinker, nonstop coffee. And I was probably, like 7 years old. And she had a pot of coffee she didn't finish drinking, which is unusual for her. But she left it out all day. And this was like a day that it was like 90 degrees, 100 degrees outside. And so it'd been just sitting out, just getting all nice and room temperature, this black coffee. And she was like, she brought my sister and I into the kitchen, and she was like, I want you each to drink this. You're going to not like this, and I want you to not get addicted to coffee like I am. And my sister drank it. She ended up becoming addicted to coffee. I ended up drinking it. I just could not. Ever since then, it's just like that memory, that sense memory of it. I can't do coffee now.
Oh. Yeah, my grandma was a fairly big coffee drinker as well, but she drank like Sanka, like instant coffee, and the first time I tried coffee was a cup of that, and I'm like, this is absolutely disgusting. And I've tried it a few times since then when I was growing up, and it just never stuck. And then like at one point in my mid-20s, it like it just happened. I was like, oh, I like this now. I don't know why. It just is, and now I like it too much. So
yeah, I can't remember if it was one of those things where like it was born out of necessity at a certain point, and then you just kind of fell into liking it, or just kind of, I don't know. I don't remember how it turned out for me, but it's an acquired taste for some people, and I was one of those people until I started drinking enough of it. So
that's for me with beer. I didn't think I was going to like beer, and in fact, like the first several times I tried to drink it, I had an awful time. I had really bad acid reflux, so it would just turn not pretty.
Yeah.
But then I found the right beer that just got me into it, and now I'm an IPA drinker. I'm that annoying white guy that loves IPAs now. So,
well, it's popular for a reason, right?
It is. Thank you for saying that. Every time I mention I'm an IPA person, someone near me is rolling their eyes every single time. I'm just like, look, I like it. It's an easy comfort for me.
I don't drink any alcohol, not as a judgmental thing at all. I just don't.
Fair.
But the coffee thing was just like, I remember mine very distinctly because I was very much a popping open a Diet Pepsi in the morning guy on the way to work or whatever, and it drove my wife nuts for some reason. Like she understood like it's still caffeine, whatever. It's almost pretty much the same ingredients reconfigured, some sort of thing. So then I switched to tea, black tea or whatever, which was fine, And then this one day, like I think we ordered from Dunkin' Donuts and I wanted a black tea, but they gave me a coffee. And I just drank it and I'm like, oh. It was a terrible Dunkin' Donuts. They always got our orders wrong, so I wasn't surprised by that. But I was like, oh, I guess this is coffee. I like this now. Granted, it was a shit ton of sugar in there.
Sure.
And creamer.
Yeah.
If you go to, you may not know this, Andrew, but if you go to any Dunkin' Donuts in the nation and you say, I want cream and sugar, you don't know what the hell you're going to get. There's no guidelines whatsoever on like how much cream or sugar you get in a Dunkin' Donuts if you ask for cream and sugar. I can go to ones in my town that are less than 2 miles apart. Vastly different coffees you're getting. So, but yeah, since then I've developed quite a taste for it, and then I've actually scaled back a lot of the sugar I put in there. So, because it was getting pretty.
Well, that's good. Wicked. I am unfortunately deeply addicted to Coca-Cola. I am deeply dependent on it.
I am definitely a soda guy. Like I will default to soda so fast. Like
so you call it soda. Sorry, I have to say it. You call it soda. Yeah. There's people who call it pop. There's people who call it soda. There are some people who call it just Coke. And then there's the people who call it soda pop.
Yeah, I call it soda. I don't know why I picked up that vernacular for it. I don't know if it's the Midwest
I find it fascinating. It's weird because my mom and sister call it soda. And I've always called it pop. I don't know where
I'm a soda guy.
Yeah. Everyone
soda.
I know is a soda. I don't know where it comes from. Yeah. Anyway, I'm sorry for interrupting.
No, it's fine. I'm more of a diet soda guy though, and that's not like, oh, it's healthier for me. It's like I just prefer the taste of that more. Also, like one of my favorite sodas were like these ones I would steal from my grandma that I actually have been having a lot of recently is the diet caffeine-free Pepsi. Like just for some reason, like, not because I'm like, oh, I need to have less caffeine. I just like the flavor of that one. But I'm usually like a diet cherry, whatever, zero, sure. Coke Zero, Pepsi Zero, whatever. That's usually my go-to for something like that. But yeah, it's kind of crazy just how fast I just jump onto soda, like as my go-to drink for things when it's not coffee. It's like I should probably just drink water. I mean, I can read plenty of studies from people saying that, water is better, but you're still you're fine with a Diet Coke unless you actually have your own personal chemical reaction to it or blah, blah, blah. But I'm like, yeah, I still need to kind of cool it though. So, yeah.
It's fair.
Not to jump over your comics segment, Xander, but coffee. Are you a big coffee guy?
I was actually going to start with coffee. So yeah. I do drink coffee. I have been doing the French press style recently. That's kind of been my thing ever since I was gifted one by my grandmother, who actually got me started on the coffee that I use for the French press. Every year I go on a family vacation to Montana. I have some family from there. And so I go to the Montana Coffee Traders store there. And so I drink, I think it's Montana Morning. I think it's what it's called. but it's a nice like dark roast, and with the French press and a little bit of I don't go crazy on the creamer. I really try not to, but a little goes a long way, you know. And I just kind of mix it in there. I try to make some cold brew, you know, homemade cold brew. So you know, I need my little bit of kick of caffeine in the morning to get me going. So that's what I do. Yeah,
we just started fairly recently, like doing cold brews. We got like the little pitcher that has the filter in the middle. You just load it up. You toss it in the fridge, and you got that for a few days, and that's been real nice because I like more of a dark roast. Yeah. In general, but if my wife and I, we kind of drink coffee all day. Yeah. Like it's usually like 2 or 3 cups each, but it's like we're having it throughout the day. So usually dark roast is a little too much, I guess, and she doesn't really like dark roast anyway. So, but when I do the dark roast with the cold brew, it's like it comes off like a lot better because the cold brew, Andrew, supposedly doing in that method really mellows out a lot of the bitterness of everything. So you get a lot more of whatever the flavor profiles are talking about. And also, you know, sometimes I'll make like some smoothies in the middle of the day, and I'll just like toss the cold brew in there, and that's always
it's great,
a nice thing. I like French press style a lot. We just got a burr grinder.
Okay.
Ooh, we used to have a blade grinder, and apparently the burr grinder, it's supposed to extract better flavors because it's not as violent, and you're not heating up the beans as much when you're grinding them. According to the fancy YouTube coffee people, I've
sure.
But the burr grinder is kind of like these gears, and it's not even it's not an expensive one. It was like $60 or something like that, and I only got it because my blade grinder kept breaking, and I didn't want to buy another one. So we decided to go with that, but it made a huge difference for the flavor for me. Like, just like, it's kind of crazy how that little bit of a difference of a thing, how the beans are destroyed into this powder or make that difference. But I like the French press too, but I'm too forgetful sometimes when I do the French press. Like I'll get it all set up and ready. All right, cool. Unless I set like an actual timer on my watch or something, it'll be like a half hour. I'm like, oh, that's still steeping. Oh shit.
Yeah, right. So it's a mixed bag with that stuff. I always set my timer and do the same thing. I sometimes forget, but when I'm feeling lazy, I run over to the Wawa. We got Wawa over here on the East Coast, and I'll grab myself a dark roast and just basic creamer, and we're good for the morning. You know, it does the job. It's no French press, but you know, sometimes you just need something
to get you through the day.
That's right. Get me started.
There's a lot of great roasters on the East Coast too. I'm blanking on one, but Buddy and previous guest Michelle Abinator, she sent over a bag from a place in New York or something like that. That was really good. I'm blanking on the name, of course, but like that's the one thing I really like found out is like, especially in my area, there's like a ton of great roasters that I can order from that easily come. So I don't know if you tend to order yours or you just kind of just like get it.
My grandmother just sends it. She's like boxes of it because she works there, or she used to work there, so she would just like send me boxes of it. I'm like, okay.
I didn't know if that blend was something you got like once a year or something, or like just when you visit or whatever. Okay, yeah. Well that's awesome. That's awesome.
She sends it all the time. That's pretty much my go-to.
All right. Well, Xander, let's talk about your comics, and we'll dive into the maybe metal portion. We'll see. I don't know I don't know where you guys stand on that, but we'll find out.
Okay, so for the comics, I'm gonna join Andrew in celebrating the spectacular Spider-Man run. I got them all right here because I just ran to the store. I got to read these. I've been really busy with Kickstarter stuff and comic stuff, so I have like a stack pretty tall. I picked this up, Toxic Summer. I don't know if you guys have seen this.
It looks fun. Yeah, I heard.
But it's got this really cool, like, you know, pseudo animated looking style inside, and that was really attractive to me. And the colors were really poppy and 90s. I'm working on the Toxic Crusaders video game at work, and so I feel this is very at home with like the 90s feel, with like the green slime and all that. And then lastly, a Dark Horse Jango Fett comic, and it's got these like really nice like watercolor. I don't think they're watercolor, but they're really beautiful spreads of artwork in here. So, and I like the Star Wars prequels. I'm a sucker for those. So that's my pickup recently.
I'm so not up on Marvel stuff. Like I'm like a decade behind. Like once my daughter was born, like 8 years ago, like I stopped going to the shop regularly and dropped majority of my titles and all that. and I've been really wanting to get the Marvel app just to start catching up through things. Mainly the X-Men stuff, even though a lot of the Hickman stuff is, the Hickman stuff's over now, and that's what everyone was really enjoying and digging. But like even a lot of the Spider-Man stuff, like I was never a big Spider-Man guy in terms of like current stuff. When I was a kid, my older brothers had these Marvel Masterworks of the Lee Ditko stuff.
Yeah, I got them right over here. Yeah, same ones.
They're digest sized. Do you have the digest sized ones?
I don't know if I have these ones right here. These are the Barnes & Noble edition, but they might be similar. I don't know.
No, I've been wanting to get those, but the ones I had, for some reason, they were like the Archie digest size, like you get from like the grocery store.
Oh, great!
I can never find them. I'm like willing to pay probably too much. That
are they singles?
Explain to my wife for them, just for the nostalgic aspect of it, because these things were beat the shit. They were torn in half, and like, sometimes I would lose one half, so I'm like halfway through the story, I'm like, oh shit,
no, yeah.
But those were my jam. And then in the 90s, like, Maximum Carnage, come on, like, that was just, I dropped off at Clone Saga though. But yeah, I've tried getting back into Spider-Man, and for some reason I love Spider-Man as the character, just like the books as never were a consistent hold on me, except for those first few ones, and not because I felt like they were bad or anything. It's just like it just didn't have that thing that hooked me as much as like X-Men did, or in more current years, just a lot more independent stuff, which is a majority of my reading, because I'm fortunate enough to know enough talented people who will send me things to check out.
That's always really nice. Yeah.
And now I'm lucky enough for some PR people from some companies that will send me PDFs like, hey, if you're interested in having this person on, check this out. And that's always been awesome. But I definitely need to make some more time just to read some just good old comics. But, I also enjoy reading Kickstarter comics and very much like ones like Cameraman, which we'll get to very, very soon.
Ooh.
But now I have to ask the biggest question that I already asked before, but now we're to it. Metal, gentlemen. Are you guys metal guys, or are we just going to end this call right now?
Let's define metal, because I think that some people I would maybe say something, and then people would.
I have a very open definition of metal. I'm not
Interesting.
A gatekeeper at all.
Yeah, I don't know if I don't go to it, but I definitely don't avoid it by any means. If you name some people, I might be like, oh yeah, I like those guys, but I'm all over the place with my music taste.
Yeah. So I saw, when I first moved to Chicago, my first concert, I think you would consider White Lung metal. I saw them live. That was a good show. That was like 2016 or so. Today even I was listening to Godspeed You Black Emperor, which I don't know if you technically consider that like actual metal. I think that's probably more post rock, ambient.
They're definitely in the larger scope. They have that influence on them for sure.
Yeah. And then, I love the, Explosions in the Sky, Illuvium. Again, those aren't really metal. But then of metal, one of my comics that I've been developing ever so slowly over the last several years is very much a heavy metal book I have. And so I've been building an awesome playlist for it. And so I've got Dio, I've got Thor, I've got Wasp, I've got lots of the 80s classics.
Yeah, 80s stuff I would probably recognize if I heard it. Yeah.
Yes, awesome.
A little bit of, would you consider Typo Negative metal?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think
so. I've been listening to
so.
them a little bit too recently, because I have buddies that are just obsessed with them as a meme band. And so
Okay. So now, whenever someone's on the show and they're not really a metal person, obviously I listen to all kinds of stuff. Earlier today, like, I'm not just like listening to metal all the time. I was, listening to. Are you guys familiar with the song "King of Wishful Thinking"?
That sounds familiar.
I don't think it does sound familiar.
It was on a Pretty Woman soundtrack. It was just like it's a total like 80s pop. Like 80s pop is also like my jam, just because like I was born in 82, so I'm like I grew up like watching too many movies that had all these songs in there and all that. Like you know, in my top 10 songs of all time, there's definitely a Cyndi Lauper song up there. You know, it's yeah, you know, right next to like Master of Puppets or something. So I'm not very like a gatekeepy when it comes to the music thing, because that's so much of the metal I love. It's vastly different from the other metal I love and stuff like that. But whenever someone comes on and they tell me, you know, other bands they like that are not metal, my brain starts churning like, okay, well, how can I convert you? How can I bridge that gap for you? So I'll be working on that throughout. But how about you, Xander? What would you say is the most metal like band or artist you listen to on a regular basis?
I feel like I don't know what the reaction is going to be to this, because I think it's a mixed bag. But okay, so two things. One, I think the last concert I went to was Trans-Siberian Orchestra, which is like that's filthy with like uber talented metal musicians actually earning money. So I'm all for it. Yeah, they were killing it. And then I grew up really loving My Chemical Romance, like unabashedly. And so like I wouldn't say they're metal by any means, but like there's guitars in there and they're going hard sometimes. So Frank Iero and stuff.
They are not, you know, at least in the realms I've explored or hang out in terms of metal, they're not like, you know, looked down upon at all. Like they are definitely, because they've influenced a lot of metal, you know, because there's a lot of more metal that has kind of that Gerard's kind of like vocal tonality is incorporated in a lot. Granted, then contrasted with guttural screaming, but you know, it's also like definitely there's been definitely influence of that in there. So I wouldn't say that's too far from that.
And I want to say that I think that, you know, I didn't really make this connection when I brought it up, but Gerard Way being in comics, I think was something that really like inspired me early on. When I was obviously listening to My Chemical Romance already. I liked comics already, but then finding out that he had an interest in writing them as well, I was like, oh, I didn't know you could just write comics and like do that. So, you know, and obviously, you know, I have some of his work. I like that he made their Killjoys album kind of into a comic anthology thing. That was really cool.
Did you read it?
That's neat. I have it on my shelf. I have yet not read the whole thing. I love the artwork in it.
Yes, I would say Becky Cloonan's art is god tier. Yeah.
Yes, I love her work. Yeah. Absolutely. That's my. Sorry, go ahead.
No, the musician like comics thing is there's just a lot more overlap. Like, I think isn't one of the brothers from Good Charlotte like a Turtles artist? Like he did some Turtle comics.
I didn't know that.
He does like the animated kind of style. Like I know he does one of the, he's done a bunch of stuff.
Like and then Gerard obviously with Umbrella Academy too. I forgot about that one as well, but another comic thing. Yeah.
Well, and his Doom Patrol run is just so good.
Doom Patrol,
Nick Carrington. Oh god, so good.
Yeah,
love the artwork in that too. Yeah.
The thing with Gerard is like it's easy to forget like that he writes comics. But it's also like it's also because it's not like, oh, this musician person's writing this book or whatever, you know. It's not like, you know, when Tyrese wrote a book, you know, and whatever. It's like, no, it's legitimate like good comic. You know, the guy knows what he's doing. He knows the craft. He knows how to do it well, and he works with super talented people who, you know, obviously, you know, I'm sure got paid well, but I'm sure like, you know, wouldn't have taken on like just a money job like that. You know? So, no, that's cool. So I'm gonna start brainstorming some stuff. I'm sure you guys have both come across Electric Callboy. I bring them up a lot on the show.
Callboy. I'm actually not.
Electric Callboy.
Having listened
I
to
like the name sound. Send stuff my way. I'm gonna listen to it. You know, I love finding new stuff.
They used to be called, and I'm just saying this for his reference, Eskimo Callboy. And they're from Germany, and they didn't realize that that's considered not a great word to be using. Yeah. But when they did that, they like were like, oh, well, we didn't know, and then they actually like addressed it, and they like put out some videos about them talking to experts about it, like. They went, and so everyone's like, what's their new name going to be? So everyone's like, oh, they're just going to call themselves Callboy. Like, that's still a fun name or whatever.
Yeah, the new name's better. I mean, it's much better. It sounds
electric.
cool.
It's like that's even like, and they came with Electric Callboy. I'm like, that's even better. Like, that's just 100% them. They're very much like a party metal band almost. Not like Andrew WK kind of thing, but like
oh my gosh, yeah.
But more like just like very, just when you get a chance, just look up Electric Callboy, We Got the Moves. If that song and video doesn't like, if you're not like, I am down with this, then you're not going to be down with them at all. That's the litmus test for them. Because that's the first thing of theirs I saw, because I kept hearing the name, and I watched it, and I'm like, holy shit, this is amazing. It's just very dancey, groovy, but it's like, they got a lot of like, higher melodies, but they also got these big fat riffs and some good screaming and stuff like that. But they just did a song with Baby Metal.
I'm adding them.
Oh, I love Baby Metal. Yes.
Yeah, Baby Metal too. I've listened to it. I have some saved from them.
Yeah, they have a song called Ratatata or whatever with Baby Metal, and it's a jam for sure.
Then I have probably listened to them because I think I remember that song.
Yeah. It's been out for a few weeks, so yeah, I'm sure it's made the rounds.
Oh, it's a new one. Then never mind. If it's new, then I haven't heard it.
Okay.
I haven't heard Baby Metal. I know they just had some sort of. I think didn't they change their lead singer recently? Like they switched
Baby
to
Metal?
like because it's like a trio.
Yeah, I don't know the lore.
It's okay. It's okay. I don't.
I'm just familiar with them like passively with stuff because I was very much when they first came around. I was kind of one of the people who were like, okay, whatever, you like it, fine. It's not for me. But a few songs came on. I'm like, this is actually some really good like guitar riffing and stuff. And then you just kind of like, oh crap, am I listening to this now? Like, they really backdoored their way into my playlists. But I think Electric Callboy is like a good gateway band for a lot of people. You mentioned Typo Negative, not a 1-to-1 correlation, but Sleep Token might be up your alley.
Sleep Token, okay.
They're a very weird band because they're like the type of people that kind of like dress up in the costumes and it's very creepy looking and all that. But the guy, the way the guy sings is very like soulful. It's really weird. It's really
that
weird.
Sounds good to me.
There's a fan base out there who basically treat them kind of like the Barry White of metal.
I mean, the more words you say, the more you're selling me on this. So
yeah,
keep going.
But they're really good. They're actually really good. I'm trying to think. I think those are two good ones enough. And then I'll always toss in my favorite Spirit Box in there just because I think they're awesome. But if you like female fronted metal bands with, who like, they're very much a metal band, but like more recently they've been like pushing a lot more electronic stuff in their music. Kind of like they have a few songs that kind of remind me of like a metal version of Garbage, almost.
Okay, cool.
So I'll make sure I send you some links to those, but I'm always touting them too because they're really great. But enough yapping about that. Thanks for indulging me.
Thanks for sharing. I love finding new music. Yeah, these I feel like for some reason Spotify like does like a really bad job of like trying to show me new music, so I have to like go seek it out, and I'm like never finding what I need. So personal recommendations are preferred.
Awesome. Well, I'm glad to recommend any type of metal to anybody just because it's fun. I listen to so much of it just for the show and just for trying to like keep up on things and all that. Like tomorrow's Friday, I'm going to be going at the gym in the morning. I'm going to be going skipping my playlist and I'll be going to the new metal releases and just seeing what's out there and all that and giving some stuff a shot. So if I can help some people find some stuff they love, definitely worth it. Awesome. So enough about that. Let's get to your awesome looking Kickstarter, which is like almost funded already, which is amazing.
It's incredible.
It's crazy.
I always love having people on like usually later on in their cycle as well, because usually they're funded by then or it's so close to being funded. I'm like, there's so much less pressure now. It's okay. But as of right now, you guys are less than $1,000 from your goal as of recording. And when this goes up next week, hopefully you guys will be like on the stretch goal number 3, hopefully, or something crazy like that.
Let's go.
But yeah, Cameraman. It looks really awesome. I love the art style going on here. I love the concept. But instead of me butchering it, how about you guys tell everybody what is Cameraman?
Yeah, go for it, Xander.
Yeah, so Cameraman is really inspired by a lot of like the early 2000s cartoons that I like loved growing up, and a mixed match of both things that Andrew and I really appreciate about that era of animation, like, you know, Ben 10 for me specifically, Spectacular Spider-Man, and Batman Beyond is like, I've tried to inject that into my veins by watching it as many times as I possibly can. I just, everything from the art direction to the sound of that soundtrack, going back to the metal there for a minute. I really love it. And it's infused a lot, but, you know, I also love movies in general, and I love the behind the scenes process of making movies. So, and I love superheroes. So I found a way to take all those things and kind of throw them in one soup, one melting pot of a concept that, you know, features a superhero that makes movies, and trying to throw it into this backdrop of, you know, we're living in a world where technology's taking over very quickly. Creatives, very livelihoods are being jeopardized, and that's a real concern and a real problem. So what if we just jump to the conclusion where that's like what happens and it's horrible, and what would we need to save us from something like that in this world where, you know, we need an answer to the artificial generation that's going on in every avenue that we've formerly enjoyed human passion created entertainment. So that was the premise of the whole thing. It features Cameron in his first day on the job as cameraman at Immortal Studios, led by the eccentric director Lorik, in his first project that takes them to space, the planet Marivel, where they'll be filming their first superhero movie live. And I don't know, Andrew, do you want to take it from there? What the rest of the scoop is all about?
Sure. So from there, we do like to keep kind of the second half of the issue kind of a little hush hush, but I'll say, you know, this is where the pages in the Kickstarter, it's in the preview pages. That's where we get to the planet Marivel, and he gets to realize that he being Cameron, realizes that he can't really be seen by the people of the planet, which is going to play into things later on throughout the story. And it's kind of this really fun, it becomes this really fun ensemble comic pretty early on in the story, where it's not just cameraman, it's not just director Lorik. There's a mysterious background figure known as Green Screen, who's in charge of the special effects. You have Coria, who's in charge of the choreography, and her twin brother Pyro. You know, you have like a whole ensemble. So it's very much, like Xander said, it's very much in that vein of the, you know, 2000 Saturday morning cartoon that him and I were just obsessed with. But it's very much its own thing. And we get to see Cameron try to figure out how to tell this story live. He's being directed by the director to go do these, go do this shot, go do this shot. And it was really kind of important to us that we found that nice balance between kind of moving the story along, finding that action, but then also figuring out that conflict. For me, one of the things that drove me to the story was that conflict that Cameron has of, as a professional, you have to kind of create this distance between yourself and your subject, specifically when you're doing something more like a documentary live filming style like they're doing for this film.
Yeah.
And so it was we explore tiptoeing what the boundary is between the subject and the documentarian, so to speak. And that's I think that's where I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, so they're taking these movies and then they're selling them back on Earth as movies in theaters because people need that to really change the status quo. But yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, it sounds great. I love the concept. Again, the art looks great. You really capture that, inspired by Bruce Timm, Batman Beyond kind of thing, without it being like you're just doing that, Yeah. And that's always a fine line that I feel like isn't appreciated enough when people do that. It's really easy Not real easy. It's hard to copy someone's style outrightly, but like it's real easy to like just like fall too far into one way. And looking at the preview pages, it's like, okay, I can see the influence, but it's definitely its own thing. It's definitely got its own vibe going on, its own sense of design, its own, and I'm not familiar with like the other influences you had, like Ben 10 and all that, but I was kind of a late comer to Batman Beyond. Like I didn't start watching it until I want to say a few years ago.
Yeah.
Maybe 5-6 years ago. But I was hooked pretty quick. I'm like, why didn't I not watch this show earlier? This is amazing.
Yeah. Yeah, the vibes are insane, and I say that in seriousness. I mean, it's crazy. Yeah.
Yeah. And just the concept of the book is just really fun, and I'm a big behind the scenes type person as well. I love that stuff. Growing up, I was the guy watching all the making sure that the DVD or VHS I bought had the extra director's commentary or had the behind the scenes stuff. And even before then, like when we had cable, I watched the half-hour HBO behind the scenes of stuff getting made. That's what that's where we would get that information and all that stuff from, and all that. And I just loved just all that kind of stuff. So incorporating all of that and into this and all these things you love and doing all that, that's one of the things, again, I love about independent comics as well, because taking all these concepts, and yeah, you could, if you're working on some other company's character, you could try to jam some of these ideas in there, and they might work with a character here or a character there. But the ability now to just say, no, I'm just gonna do my own thing and put all this stuff I love into this one thing, like that's just awesome. Like it's one of the things I love about independent comics, if not the biggest thing I love about independent comics, because for better or worse, it is exactly as as close as to your vision as possible without any other interference.
Yeah.
How did you two hook up? Like, was this a concept that Andrew came to Xander with, or Xander had and Andrew came on and fleshed out? Were you guys friends before? What's the history there?
So we've gone back and forth on trying to recount how this happened, because it feels like it's been a minute now since we've been working on this comic together. Yeah. When did this happen? I came up with the characters kind of straight out of college in like 2016, or sorry, straight out of high school in 2016 when I was starting college. And I was just like doodling around. I want to get into making comics. And then I designed something really simple, something I can kind of mess around with, and came up with the design for CAMERAMAN. And then I ended up shelving it because I was like, the comics are way too hard. I'm going to do it later. And I'll figure it out. Let me just work on my YouTube channel and I'll figure this out later. So I'll come back around to it a few years ago now, I think about 3 years ago. And then I started really working on the idea. I spec'd like so many different versions of the script, trying to build out the universe and the characters and the dynamics, and trying to really build a world. But I knew I wanted someone to help me with it because, I felt pretty confident in my ability to bring the comic to life visually. I also felt confident in the themes that I think that we'd been working with, that I'd been working with up to that point. But I was like, I really want somebody who's very familiar with the comic format to bring this to life in the way that comics can, with the knowledge to do so. And so that's when I went to ye old Twitter, searched up comic writer, and I went through and sorted through a bunch of different people that looked like had a really good sense for what I was kind of going for, and Andrew was that person. Hit him up, and I don't know, Andrew, on your end of things, how did that come across? Some random guy hitting you up, you work on this comic with me.
That actually goes into exactly what Don was saying just a little bit ago, talking about like the thing he loves about indie comics being that like they're definitely passion projects. And that's kind of, so when Xander messaged me, he DM'd me on Twitter and was just like, hey, I've got this comic. I think you'd be a great writer for it. I'd like you to help me. I'm still trying to, get this thing figured out. What would you think of, helping me out with this? And I was so excited by this idea because I'd never really been given a challenge like that before. I've worked in other people's playhouses. Like, for instance, I did the backup story of Radiant Black, issue 22, that Kyle introduced me to, which was an awesome experience. Shout out to you, Kyle. And but this felt like a completely different thing. This is still a passion project, it's still a passion project, but it felt like it was something that you're still on the ground floor. You need to kind of help. You needed kind of the support. I wouldn't even say help. I'd say more support in making this rocket ship actually be able to launch through. And I had all the excitement of having similar influences. I looked at Xander's art and I was blown away. It's so bright and colorful. It has that very, 2000s cartoon vibe to it. And I was like, oh, this could be really good. I'm very into this. And I was like, yeah, let's do this. And he already came to me with an entire series guide and was like, here's the characters, here's the world, here's what I'm thinking for the plot for the first issue. And we kind of hashed it back and forth between like what we're thinking for the first issue. And then we kind of realized, oh, this is a little bit too big for like a standard 22-page book, which is another beautiful thing about indie comics. You don't have to be restrained by 22 pages.
Yeah.
So we're making this thing a beautiful 47 pages. And it was just something that really, it's been exciting for me ever since working on it. It hasn't always been easy, because sometimes you're trying to kind of figure out somebody else's vision and also try to make it fit within your understanding of it. So like that part of it, I'm used to. I'm a copywriter during the day. So like trying to figure out people's visions is something I'm used to. But then, one of the big challenges I had, which ended up becoming an awesome, I think probably one of my favorite parts of the story, was figuring out that difference, the concept that if you are a cameraman, you are inherently a passive character. You're not an active hero. So how do you make a character who is supposed to watch other people? How do you make them a superhero? How do you make them actively helping other people besides just watching it? And I remember I asked Xander about that, and I asked our editor, Claire Napier, and they both gave me like awesome like ideas and thoughts, and I was like, oh, totally, that's exactly how we can make it work. And so we got to inject a lot of that into the first issue, and it makes me more and more excited the more Xander and I kind of have been playing with it ever since.
Yeah, I really couldn't crack that egg for the longest time. I was like, how do I take this character that's like in theory, in premise, like in everything, in thematically is supposed to be passive in so many ways, but still an active character, and yet the primary character we're following. How do we make that work? And I'm like smashing my head against a wall, and I'm like, Andrew, help me. And so I'm like, and then Andrew was beautifully able to write a script that I don't know, we're taking off and we're flying now. It's like, to use your analogy. So it's really fun to see how it happened. And yeah, there was a lot of back and forth to figure it all out. It's really hard to land on something that you feel like, both of you understand it fully. You know what I mean? When you're working on something like that. And so that was the fun challenge for me. I usually work on stuff independently. So working with so many awesome collaborators on this one project was like very fun and very like challenging as someone that's not used to doing that. But it was incredible, and I can't wait to do more of it.
Yeah.
Well, as being an artist myself, like I think this is probably the first time I've had anybody on where it's been the artist is looking for the writer. Not that that's something that's unheard of ever, but it's so rare.
It's pretty rare. It's pretty rare.
And it's definitely something that it's on my mind to do in the future. I actually tried, like my collaborator right now, Steve Bryant on Evie and the Helsings. He came to me with, the skeleton of that concept, but we, were buddies before that. And before that, not before, we were buddies before that. And then in between there, I'd actually came to him with a concept to have him kind of help me. Like, you're really good at doing like the writery research stuff. I'm way too lazy to do that. Like there's gonna be a lot of like information we need. Like here's the big ideas. Like that's kind of like my problem with when I try to write things is like I have all the big scenes I want, or even the little scenes. It's all the ligaments in between that make them matter, because they'll matter to me because I'm thinking of them and I know the idea or whatever. But to make it matter to anybody else is just like, that's the tricky part. So Xander being able to step aside and say like, you know what, I need help with this. That's one, a very smart thing to be able to recognize with your thing. And, I hope this, I don't know how much collaboration you have with your, art usually with your own personal stuff, but hopefully it seems like it's been a very fruitful and a very rewarding collaboration, which, is, more, definitely the majority for my experiences myself. And I hope for both, Andrew, you as well. And whenever you're collaborating with somebody, there's always that kind of like slight worry that like, oh, what if they have an idea that's just terrible? How am I going to tell them I don't like this? This is bad. And I kind of like you less for thinking of this. But, more often than not, it's just like, for me, it's been, oh, that's your idea? Like, that's really cool. How can we do this? And I'm like, do we have to do this? And I'm sure they feel the same way about me. I'm sure whenever I email Steve with like thoughts about, and I know he's just gonna be like, oh God, I need some coffee. What the hell is Don sending me now? What random headcanon lore shit is he sending me that I have nowhere to put in this book, but he wants to tell me it anyway?
But I will at least say, like, no, I was actually going to say that's kind of something I love about the collaboration I have with Xander specifically. I've had a lot more, I'll say, traditional collaboration styles with artists where it's usually just, I'll send them this, I'll talk about the script with them, and then I'll send them the script, and then they just send me the beautiful art that's all ready to go for the letterer. And but yet with Xander, him and I have been talking, I would say almost daily for the last 2 years maybe.
Yeah.
And it's just been a constant conversation. One of my favorite comic book creator documentaries is it's the Grant Morrison one from, I forgot the name of the company that did it, but it talks about how they collaborate with Frank Quitely and how they would meet at their home, or they would meet at one of their homes in Scotland, and they would just kind of hash out the story next to each other. Now, granted, Xander lives all the way over in Pennsylvania. I'm all the way in Chicago. So that's not exactly possible, but I feel like we have the second best thing where we're just constantly in conversation with one another. I'm pitching him ideas. He's pitching me ideas. He's giving me feedback. I'm giving him my thoughts on whatever, ideas he's sending me. So like we're constantly kind of, just working it through together. And that's the exact kind of collaboration I'd love to have. I know it's not always possible with, deadlines and everything, but if you have the time for it, there's no better way to, because it's just fun. It makes the act of making a comic should be fun. And it's not always, but I think when you have the right collaboration, when you have the right people on your team, when you have the right circumstance, there's nothing better.
It's too much work to not have fun with it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Whether you make a good comic or a bad comic, it's a lot of work. And if you're not having fun during it, then it just why bother?
As an artist, I find like the biggest I would say barrier getting into comics. I come from like an animation background, so I'm used to drawing everything 16:9. I'm ready for every moment to have its flow and to be able to kind of feel out a scene like in a very different way than comics does that. And I'd find that like whenever I wanted to go draw a page of a comic, I'd catch myself just being afraid to put something on the page because I wouldn't like it. And then I'm thinking to myself, and I'm like, why don't I just make it to where I like it? And then it sounds very like counterintuitive to think of it that way, but I'm like, I have the power to change this if I want. And, you know, obviously you're speaking of that timeline, obviously you don't want to continue to do that forever because it'll never come out. But within reason, it's good to be like, you know what? This is why we do this. This passion project angle of this is really, especially for this first issue where you want to make this really great impression with everyone. It's important. And if you're both having really fun with it and everyone's, you know, feeling like they're getting to contribute their part to it, I mean, I'm all here for it, you know?
Yeah.
I was going to ask you about like the transition from working in animation to drawing sequential comics, because, you know, I know some people who do storyboards and comics and stuff like that, and they're different animals.
They are,
but they're, you know, there's lessons one could serve the other with. And I know with animation, you know, just general like dynamics and movement, and that's something that's probably like, you know, paramount above all else is keeping that kind of like impression going along with everything. Is that something that you've, you know, maybe not necessarily struggled with, but is it something like, you know, you it took you a while to get to that point where you're like, okay, this is the position of the pose that I want to have on the page? I mean, you were kind of referencing it, you know, just now, but like, was that a hard fought process for you, or was it like once you did it a few times, you're like, okay, I can trust myself, I know what I'm doing?
Yeah, I still think it's difficult, you know, for this first issue, but I will say that, you know, animation, obviously, like, you know, you do have a peak of a move of an action, so it's easy for me to decide what peak of the action I want to really, you know, pull on for that panel or whatever. But it's choosing the right angle to help the page feel dynamic, to lend to that reading, that zigzag that we're used to reading in. Driving the motion of the reader's eye through the page is really, really hard to do. And part of me really just tends to think about it in the way that, like, you know, I think Ditko and Jack Kirby would do a lot of their pages, which it was just like block, 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 block. Sometimes it would just be horizontal. Very simple, very clean. You cannot go wrong with it. And I look at some of the comics I'm pulling off the shelf this week, and I'm like, this stuff's insane. So it's just beautiful how well they've been able to you know, concept the page, and you know exactly where to read, and it's fantastic. So there's really an art form. I have a long way to go with it, but I am finding myself like really enjoying finding where my strengths are and where I can improve, especially on this first issue. I am really proud of the work on this book, though. It's my best work for sure. But in the comics format, especially.
It's been a few years since I've done this, but a few years back, I was invited to a couple of libraries to talk to kids about making comics, you know, like, and I remember my first one time I did it, like, okay, you know, it was very, they're just like, oh, just come talk about like the process of storytelling in comics or something. I had this whole slideshow thing. I had going in depth. I'm going on for like 45 minutes, and it's these kids, and like they're just like blank faced, and they're like, so I'm just like, I just stop what I'm doing. I'm like, all right, like, does anyone have any questions? And they just want to know how to make a comic. They didn't want me talking about breaking down why this page was drawn this way and all that. So that, like, you know, as like embarrassed as I felt, like, not just like recognizing that sooner, but like, trust me, this has a point. I'm bringing this up. It forced me to kind of go back and like look at the grid, you know, and explain to them, like, you know, I was luckily able to bring it back to some of the stuff I was showing them, like, see how fancy they got with it. You don't have to do that. This always works. You know, and I even gave them the 22 Wally Wood's 22 panels that always work. And one thing I always tell everybody, like, but I don't know if you've seen if you're familiar with that, Xander, the Wally Wood's 22 panels that always work.
I don't know if I have. No.
Oh, it's a classic.
Yeah, it's a classic.
I'll send it to you, Xander.
Yeah, Wally Wood, the classic comic book artist. He on a page, he put down drew 22 panels that like just the way things are framed or whatever. And they always work, and it's kind of like one of like the most stereotypical things, but accurate things to like have like up on your wall next to your drawing board when you're first starting out. Mm-hmm. And one thing I've told a lot of people, and I've done myself numerous times, is I'll just take some time and just like redraw them in my own style, just to get that visual language to myself. But again, it's all within the grid, and it's all within like even just like opening up the grid and all that. So just hearing you talk about that and appreciating that, I just had to bring that up because I feel like some people get too fancy for their own good. They feel like they have to like break the panel borders all the time, or like just do this crazy zigzag layout. And it's like, no, man, the grid's fine. The grid works because, it works because it works. Like,
it can be disorienting and distracting. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah. And not that getting fancy and getting wild isn't called for sometimes. No, of course not. You definitely do that, from time to time. But yeah, there's been definitely comics where, I don't think I'm speaking out of line when I mention that a lot of folks, including myself, love like Chris Bachalo's work. Chris Bachalo is just amazing, super talented. Sometimes it's just like, what's going on this page? What's the next panel? I don't know. Granted, that's not so much, I think, in his later work, but definitely in the earlier stuff, it was like he was definitely more just going nuts on layouts and stuff. So, but yeah, you don't have to do that, and I'm glad that that's not something you felt like you had to do. And also like just the idea of like not only knowing where your key movement, your peak movement is, there's the angle, the sheer like just moving the quote unquote camera itself and all that is super key. Now,
and another element of this that was really challenging in particular was a lot of the concept art, because these characters a lot of times are appearing. I mean, in this case, they're all appearing for the first time, so it's like, how do I create a location that I can come back to and feel okay about? And things might change as like I decide, okay, I have more time between these two issues. Let me move this, or maybe some time passed in the comic and things change a little bit. This is a great format for a reason. We can do these kinds of things, right? But trying to get it like as close to how you want it to be the first time around is a lot of pressure, but it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun too. And some of the characters in this, Blue Star, the name of the movie they're making, like finding the design for that superhero was like a real challenge. Like, how do I do something that takes some great elements and design motifs from the things that we talked about earlier and make it something wholly original and new, in a way that people can kind of like see something that they liked and like, oh, that's this new thing over here I haven't seen before. I find it familiar, but exciting and new. And that's kind of what I hoped to achieve with a lot of the designs and the art in general. Yeah.
Definitely. I do feel that definitely comes through. There's always that, not to say that there's anything like that I've seen on the pages from Cameraman, but there's always that like point where like you've designed a character or something and you're drawing them on the fifth page they're on or whatever. And you're like, why did I do this?
Yes.
Why did I make this
definitely.
so complicated? Why are there so many lines on this suit?
That's actually one thing I love about Xander's designs in general, is that I feel like he doesn't add anything extra that doesn't need to be there. The cameraman suit, there's a good number of lines, but it's not like you're looking at a Rob Liefeld design. Yeah. It's a radically different experience. And and I think it makes it easier for us then to also lean into some of the more, for lack of a better term, cartoonish elements of things. Like there's a page after the previews where Cameraman he's discovering that he can actually fly in his suit. And I knew that Xander was going to nail this panel. And so I wrote into the script that Cameraman, I can't remember the specific phrasing I used, but Cameraman is, can't control his suit and the suit is flying up. And then Xander ended up turning it into a panel, or a single panel with like a small version of Cameraman trying to, like, he's kind of starting to lose balance, and then he's like fully tilted and it's like closer up, so it's right in front of the reader. So it kind of feels more fluid, like animation. But like, I think that would be so difficult to do if there were so many lines. But
Yeah.
because his designs are so clean, they're crisp, they're just good looking designs. I think it allows us to be able to get away and do a lot of really fun things with the physics that might not be as easy to do with lots of line work.
Yeah, absolutely, and that was a fun. I think that panel you're talking about is actually in the trailer for the
Yes.
the comic.
Yep,
so
it
if you
is.
guys wanted to go check that out, you certainly could, or get the comic yourself when it comes out. One of those things.
I'm sure that like common sense mentality of like not being overly complicated with the design, it comes from animation as well, because you can't do that.
You animate one project
design something.
You animate one project where you feel really ambitious and you're like, no, it's for the art, and then you're like doing for the art like a year into it, you're like, this is horrible. Oh, this is awful. I need to never do this again, and swear off completely. But no, it's really funny. But it's true.
And something you touched on was this, like you're drawing these characters for like the first time, but also like aside from like the general concept stuff like on the page. And as someone now who is, I've drawn, a few issues of different projects with different characters, and having to look back now at some of them when I'm like, right now I'm in issue 5 of something, and I'm looking back at stuff from issue 1 because we're coming back to some stuff. And I'm looking at how I drew those characters like 2.5 years ago.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh wow, 1, I guess I got better. And 2, like, they don't look like that anymore. It is developed over time and all that. So that really came to mind when you brought that up, is just that something that people don't think about is like, as we get more comfortable with our characters, I'm sure it's with writing as well. As you get comfortable writing the characters, you're like, oh, maybe they wouldn't have had that exact dialogue as I wrote in issue 1 by issue 5. Like they would be this. They probably would say it more like this, and that's kind of the. We're not George Lucas. We're not going to go back and fix it, but it's one of the fun things though about comics, because it's almost like being able to being able to visually just track your growth and track your comfort with something. And while you're like wishing it was the quote unquote better version of what you have now, people still enjoy that first version and are still enjoying the current version. They're growing with it. And this is my long-winded way of saying, Cameraman 1, 47 pages. Is there plans for more? If this is,
I'll let Xander take on that one.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we were talking after our stream the other day on my YouTube channel, and I have like a long list of notes that I keep teasing and telling Andrew about. I'm like, it's a horrible long list of things that I would love to do at some point, but no, we talked about in particular, specifically, a couple issues beyond this, just in greater detail than we ever had. But there's so many ideas for like what we're setting up in this first comic, and I think you really get a good taste for it. A really good idea of the themes that we're going to want to touch on, and it's going to leave you wanting more in a good way. But I mean, in that first issue, you still get so much that like introduces you to the world. And again, that's the whole thing, going back to what we were doing initially. Oh, can we do a 22-page comic? It's like, well, not if you want to have the characters introduced and the ensemble and then the superhero story. And but future issues are absolutely on the table, 100%.
Yeah, this has actually been a conscious effort. So the 47 pages, granted, it wasn't initially 40. We didn't say, "Hey, we're going to write exactly 47." It was, we're gonna figure it out, but we're going to keep it, to a reasonable length. But the thing that I kept coming back to internally is as I mentioned, I'm a huge fan of Chainsaw Man, but I also just love a lot of shonen manga and just manga in general. A lot of them, their first chapters are 40 to 50 pages. So for me, it felt like, oh, I realize now why I really seem to like a lot of manga from the get-go, where with comics, I'll like a first issue a lot of times, but there's usually not enough meat there for me to kind of, I'll usually come back, read issues 2 and 3, but it usually takes me longer to get to that point where I'm like, oh, this is must-have reading. Where with manga, I feel like that timeline can sometimes, not always, be shorter, because I've already spent a little more time with the plot, with the characters. They're already teasing all kinds of stuff for us. And again, the financial realities of a 22-page comic, sometimes that has to happen. But for us, when we were thinking about how we want to do this, we couldn't do this any other way. And so it's probably not going to be 47 pages every chapter. We're going to play around with that. But at the very least, this first chapter, we wanted to make sure it was the big summer blockbuster of the year. Hopefully, knock on wood.
Yeah, and to touch on that a little bit from how I was viewing it, the same in a different way, but kind of very similar, like TV animation background. I'm thinking like, oh, this is like dropping like the 2-episode premiere of a new show or whatever, like that in my mind, or like the movie that gets released in theaters, and then you have like the episodes that, or like the show that the TV show spinoff or whatever. And that's a less good analogy, but it's like this is like the first upfront like package of the story that it's going to really get you hooked into it, and hopefully have you join us for the rest of it, because I think it's really going to be worth it.
Yeah.
Well, you kind of answered my next question, Andrew, by saying like it's not going to be always, the next ones aren't going to always be 47 pages. That's not the standard page count you're putting out there. But do you kind of see this, any potential future stories being one shots like this though, like just being like, here's the next chapter in this one package here
for the cameraman?
For cameraman.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I think so.
So we haven't like specifically talked about like what we were thinking, but I kept telling him, because it kind of initially started as a bunch of apologies from him, because I was writing the script and I was like, oh man, there's so much stuff that he has listed in the plot, and so much character stuff that I want to inject into this, and some other little like teaser things that I think we could really play up. And so there was like little bits and pieces, and I was like, well, the manga does it with a longer page count than 22 pages. I feel like we don't have to rush things through. And so it just kind of was like naturally what it became, that because it needed to become that. And I feel like, again, Xander and I haven't really talked about this exactly, but I feel like we're just going to kind of base it off of what the story needs. If we're doing this through Kickstarter, there's not the same sort of reality. Granted, I don't imagine we're going to do a single chapter in 120 pages, but at the very least, I feel like it's going to be, within a reasonable range, the 20 something pages to potentially up to 50 pages. Well, and it'll just be dependent on what the story necessitates.
Yeah, absolutely.
No. Yeah, Andrew, as you said, like I feel like I'm with you there in terms of like just the length of a issue. Like you want to kind of sit with the characters a bit, and that's another great thing, independent comics can offer people. Is like you get a chance to sit with a character, you get your graphic novellas, so to speak, it's independent comics. The big two, and even the other companies, they're not really doing stuff like that anymore. There's 3 different projects I eventually want to get to that are going to be of that vein. They're not going to be a mini series. They're not going to be a full-length graphic novel, but it's going to be a hell of a lot more than 22 pages, but definitely less than like 80. So it's like, it's having that option to do something like that. And I kind of feel like for the value of, what you guys are offering on the Kickstarter, like, for, I just backed the digital for $8, 47 pages. To me, that's more than fair.
Yeah, and that's kind of what Xander and I were very conscious too about. Like, okay, what is the right amount of money to ask? Also recognizing the financial reality of just everything in the world, including our own financial element of it. Because it's not easy to price a comic on Kickstarter. I, as a reader, would always complain when I would see Kickstarter comics sometimes being, $15 for a digital. But then I started, I got to know a lot more comic creators who were doing Kickstarters, and a lot of them were like, hey, this is really literally the only way that I could fund to make this book. And it's like, well, and by kind of learning to empathize with the situations, that it's not just people trying to be greedy. A lot of times it's just people trying to make ends meet and trying to make this thing that they're passionate about. Then I'm like, oh, but then we kind of figured out like, oh, here's how we can play with the price. Here's how we can do these things and find a way that's both approachable for them, but also, helps us achieve our goal.
Yeah, absolutely. And the variant tiers and the different covers and having them kind of like, really, really spaced out that way, I felt like would give people the option if they wanted to hop in at a less like at like a tier that just gives them access to the book. And then there's also tiers for the people that really want to dive into the deep end and like have their 4 different versions and like some prints and the behind the scenes stuff too. So
I mean, speaking from experience, like I'm not a variant cover person myself, but people love variant covers. So who are we to like not offer that for people who want it? And if you make it fun, if you have, a certain theme for it, or if you have a cool artist coming on and doing variant covers, like, sure, go for it, go do it. I like backing digitally for Kickstarters for several reasons. One, I read primarily digital now. While this bookshelf looks very nice and all that, that's pretty much all the space I have in the house to put books. So I have to be very judicious about what physical things I have. Because all the short boxes I have of my old comics are shoved in this closet over here, and there's no more space. Yeah. But also, to me, I feel like, as someone who's had to fulfill Kickstarters, like this is the easiest thing I could do for you guys. Like, I can support the book, I can read it. You just gotta send me a link, and that's it. You got nothing extra work to do. Like I feel good about that. So and it's also lets me, because they tend to be a cheaper tier as well, I can back more. Absolutely. It's instead of spending 20, 25 here, I can spend 8, 10, 5 and do all that.
I've really enjoyed that about Kickstarter.
Yeah. And it's not that the books aren't worth it at all. It's just my own personal methodology for it. Like I said, I think all your tiers are priced more than fair, to be honest.
Thank you.
$15 for the standard cover of a 47-page comic. Like, I think that's definitely more than fair. We've for our comic Evie and the Housings, I believe it was $15, and it's a 24-page comic. We have a thicker cardstock cover. We try to make it a little bit more worthwhile. And we tend to throw in a lot of like extra little goodies with the stretch goals and stuff like that. But we know it's not the cheapest comic you're gonna buy, but it really lets us do more, like you said. And I think the idea of the kind of what's the word I'm looking for? The negative. I'm totally blanking on the word, but basically the idea of creators getting paid for their work is no longer like a bad thing. Because I still remember the early days of Kickstarter where someone was like getting paid for the book. People were like, "What is this? How dare you?" And now more often than not, and it might just be the crowds we run in. It's like, okay, so what are the creators getting paid? Are they getting paid?
Right. And are they getting paid? Yeah. Right.
Yeah. Can't anything. So but I definitely feel like that part of the crowdfunding culture has turned a bit to where it's like, people are cool because they know people are getting money to live and make more things and make it all worthwhile. And because we're comic makers, and we'll do it as long as we're not in the red.
Yeah, exactly.
Amen.
Absolutely. Just want to make more comics, guys. That's what we're doing here. So
if all ends up, if you have your day job and it all ends up breaking even, guess what? Success.
It's a win. It's a win.
But not that should be the goal for everybody. But so I think everyone should definitely go check this out. It looks great. I'm really excited to read it. I can't wait till is the book done? Like, you guys are just waiting?
It's almost done. I even received some of the. Xander sent me previews of some of the very last pages of the book that we're still figuring out, like little bits and details. But it's so close, and I'm so excited to have this thing completed in my hand. And it's every day we're getting closer.
Yeah, absolutely.
Nice.
I'm like working my butt off to finish those last few pages to get them all tidied up, and Nathan Kempf, our letterer, is diving in on those pages and getting them lettered, and they look great. I mean, the ones that are on the preview page, I'm really just, I think that he just took it and made it something that like it wasn't before. You know, it's really crazy. That's another thing about comics I love. Just, you know, I thought I'd done a lot of the work with the art, and I'm like, here it is. That's the story. But then you add the lettering and then the words that are being lettered, and it's like it takes on like a brand new identity. It's like I didn't even draw this page. It's like it's just the story happening in front of me now. It's really crazy. So.
With every new issue I get from something I've finished, when I get the finished thing in my hands, I'm still like, oh wow, this looks like a real comic.
Yeah, right.
Wow,
yeah, exactly.
It actually looks like an actual thing. That's crazy.
Yeah, I still can't picture what it's going to be like to have it in my hand or to hand it to somebody, and like that, I'm really excited for that.
I hope you have the feeling I'm sure Andrew had his first time with it, and
oh yeah, with Radiant Black, to have it in your hands.
In your hands, like I made this.
Yeah,
you know, I did this. It's really a great feeling. It's a very addictive feeling too.
Oh so
you've been warned. But you definitely have your own successes with animation and things like that. And I did want to mention the rest of the team, Claire and Nathan, very talented people. I'm glad to see a lot more independent comics also having editors, because I feel like, you know, especially a lot of the freelance editors I'm seeing pop up a lot, these are very smart people, and even if their contributions are just helping stay the course or reinforce your own confidence in your ideas or whatever it is, it's incredibly crucial, because I think it enhances, not that it needs to be, but I think it enhances the your own like your own perceived legitimacy with the book and the project, because there's someone else here who's not a quote unquote creator on the book, who is like, no, this is good, this is, you know, and even though they may be paid to be saying so, you know, it's their word, their eye, their experience you're banking on. And I feel like it's a worthwhile endeavor for independent creators to look into if they can, because it's just part of the things that help you grow. It makes your book better. You know, we have an editor on our book, and it's just a great experience, just because it's just nice having that extra set of eyes that has different experiences and all that. And, you know, Nathan's lettering, he's a very talented letterer. You know, I've seen plenty of his work. And lettering cannot be understated. You know,
no, not at all.
You got a great letterer, you know, and you got a bad one, yet everyone knows. and have, as someone who has lettered things badly, you know, I will hoist myself up on that petard. Like, yes, it can really affect how a book reads. So I'm glad you all got a super awesome team behind you on this. Before I let you go, I want to ask, what is your like working setup when you're getting ready to work? Like, you know, you sit down for the day, you're like, it's my Andrew, start with you, it's my writing time. Like, what is kind of like your methodology, your kind of ritual for like, or is it like, I have so many things to do right now, it's wherever I can sit down, and like, if it's typing notes into my phone or scribbling furiously on a notepad or something, do you have like that kind of like setup for yourself?
So, well, before I answer the question though, the other person on the team that I want to shout out is George Combates. I butchered the last name. I'm so sorry, George. The featured cover artist for the one variant that we have. And then, but to answer your question, so it depends on how I'm working. It depends on what I'm working on. But for the most part, you know, I am always on my phone with, you know, I've got my phone in front of me and I'm just typing away at the notes app. That's usually like the big one. For Cameraman, it was kind of a mix of, you know, a little bit of note taking, you know, as the day comes by, I'm thinking like, oh, let's add a scene where this type of thing happens. Oh, I think we should have this kind of emotional beat. those sort of elements definitely get added in through the notes. But for the most part, it was pretty straightforward. I just kind of just started writing the script. Because at this point, Xander and I had really knocked out the outline. So for those types of projects, yeah, I would say I'm typically just knocking it out on Google Docs real quick. Not quick, sorry. But I'm just like, I'm sitting down in front of my computer. I'm going through Google Docs. But then for something like my own projects that I'm currently trying to develop, that is a whole bunch of just obsessing over my notes app. And I'm just like figuring things out. And I'm like even today I was organizing for one particular pitch that I want to start sending out to publishers, organizing all my thoughts from my notes app into a separate document. So then I can turn that into an outline to then pitch out to editors. And so it's more chaotic when it's just me doing it for myself. But when I'm doing it for other people, I feel like it's probably because, again, I come from a copywriting background, so I'm always used to, creating timelines, creating specific deadlines, over communicating usually. I feel like every couple hours I'd be giving Xander updates on everything. Thankfully he didn't boot me out.
I love it.
And so it's just about communication for me and just staying in front of my computer, even if sometimes I'm not in front. Like there's days after my day job where I'm like, I can't look at a computer screen. So then I'll just type it into my phone. Google Docs works on the phone as well. And so, like for me, it's just about knocking it out, knocking page to page and just finding a way to do it in a way that makes me feel comfortable, because when I'm more comfortable, it's going to be easier for me to write. So, yeah.
How about you, Xander? What's obviously you have the day job with animation and all that. So when it's time to make comics, like, do you set yourself up? Do you have like music playing? Do you just or you just kind of like literally just like switch gears? Okay, animation day done, comics.
Yeah. So all day I am working at Retroware, where we make retro inspired indie games. I mentioned Toxic Crusaders. We're releasing one called Iron Meat, and I work with a large team of like freelance pixel artists, helping them figure out animations for like beat 'em up style games, like all these other kinds of things. So it is a very different headspace to live in, right? But of course, like you bring in your love for what you pull on whenever you go to do anything creative. When I do that work, so it is just shifting. It's just kind of shifting to a different gear when I'm thinking about, okay, well now how are my influences and the way that I like see the world like going to affect how I'm going to do this work. Yes, I do listen to music in my headphones. I've generally got to listen to something without lyrics. I can't watch a show. I can't like have a movie in the background. I will be listening and I will be watching. I can't do it. And with lyrics, I can probably do lyrics if I've heard the song a bunch of times, but if it's like something new, I struggle to like do it. Podcasts kind of work. I don't know. It's a mixed bag sometimes, but I do find that I have to be really comfortable with being loose at first, because sometimes I'll want to go in and just like do the final links, like diving into the page, and I'm like, nope, let's like slow down, let's do a thumbnail, let's like make sure we like the thumbnail, because if you don't like the thumbnail, you're gonna wish you just like the thumbnail to begin with. And so learned that a couple times, but yeah, no, comfortability is like super important. I touched on it earlier, but yeah, like, oh gosh, I forgot what I was going to touch on that I said earlier, but yeah, I mean, looking at the script is what I'll do. I'll have it on my phone, or I'll have it on my laptop, or I'll have it on my desktop, and I'm like looking at the script, and like again, I'm like watching the scene in my head, as if it's a movie, like a show. You know what I mean? And I'm like hearing the characters talking and like what their faces might look like, and that's what I'm trying to bring to the page when I'm working with the script. And then try to see like, is there any way that I can take the script and make it look very fun visually, right? Because it's not always prescribed what it should look like, or where they should be, or what should be happening physically. So trying to think about that stuff as well. And sometimes the idea comes to you late, and you got to rework it a little bit. But we get there.
I was very intentional with that, with scripting for Xander. Was like, I didn't want to a lot of writers, when they start working with a brand new artist they're not familiar working with, they will just heap on tons of description. And I didn't really want to be that kind of writer, just because a lot of artists, I really haven't met a lot of artists that like a lot of description. I know they exist, I just haven't really met them. So typically, so even though all my scripts are typically different lengths, I feel like for Xander's, knowing his animation background, knowing the comic pages that I've seen of his before writing this, I knew that I could give him a little bit less description, kind of give him more room to play around in. And I'm really glad that he took that challenge, and and the pages turned out really good as a result of that. So I was very glad that we both did that together.
Yeah, in my time, I've seen a fair amount of writers give me scripts that range in like Marvel style, one page, paragraph. Here's the page, and to super descriptive, but the one thing that always kind of saves it from being like, oh God, is when they write at the end, or do what you want. Right. To me, it's just as welcome as having complete like zero information, because it puts me in a better headspace of what they're thinking, of like what they're imagining. Like with Evening the Housing, Steve, he's fairly, he's an artist himself, so he knows how much is too much. And my favorite things are the fight scenes, because he'll just write, here's where they start, here's where they end, in the middle, go nuts. And that's the kind of like freedom like someone like me really appreciates. But it is very much to each their own. I think a hard part of writing comics is definitely like, you want to get your feelings and your vibe and your kind of ideas across, but you don't want to sound like you're being a dictator about it. You don't want to be, overtly, just controlling, or come across that way at the very least. One of my favorite anecdotes I've heard was back when Scott Snyder and Greg Capullo first started working together. And Xander, I don't know if you're familiar with this, but are you familiar with Greg Capullo though?
I would probably recognize the work, but I'm really terrible with names, to be honest with you.
He's like a modern master of comics. Okay. He's been in the industry since the early 90s. He drew Spawn for many, many years. Okay. X-Men, X-Force.
If you read the New 52 Batman, that was with Scott Snyder. That was Greg Capullo's art.
And Greg had gone away from comics for a while. I think the New 52 Batman was his big return back to comics, because he was working for McFarlane Toys and stuff like that for a long time, and just doing like album covers and things like that. And Scott, Snyder at that point had like grown as like the new writer, and so he gives Greg these scripts, and they're like ultra detailed, telling him about camera angles and all these things. And Greg's, very much a New York old school guy. He's like, what the fuck is this? Who the fuck does this guy think he is? And it's funny because right now they're like brothers, They obviously have a very deep love for each other. But at the time, it was just like, what is the, because that's not what he's used to. That's not what, he would actively do the opposite of what he was asking. Because and eventually they got on the phone, and apparently, based on the anecdote, after they spoke on the phone, it was all love. It was just like, this is one of those things where it's like, but just having the script come across that way, and the person's just like, what the fuck is this guy's problem? is a fear of mine. If I'm, whenever I try to write scripts, I'm like, if I want to write for a different artist, like, I don't want to be that guy. I don't want them to be like, what the fuck is he thinking?
As a writer, I'm afraid of someone looking at my script and being like, okay, Alan Moore wannabe. Like, I don't want to give you like, 17-page description for a single page of the comic, but sometimes, this was kind of relevant. So while I was working on Cameraman, I also snuck around and did a little short comic called Monolith with V. Gagnon. And then I also Krista Harrider was my editor on it. and Buddy Bodine did the letters, did the letters on it. And excuse me, the script, I had a very specific idea. I wanted it to have a very specific. Every page had a visual center column. Every page, and there was a thematic reason for it. There was a story reason for it. I was really excited about this because I love playing around with this, the medium itself. And I remember in order to not feeling like I'm being a dictator, I did kind of what you were suggesting, and I add on top of every page. If I'm always like feeling like I'm giving too much direction, I'll always add a little bit on the top, being like, at the very least, this is the vibe that I want to go for with this. You don't have to follow the verbatim beats of the panels, because I usually write full panel style or full script style. But no, like I like to just kind of make sure you have an understanding of what the vibe is that I'm going for, so that when the artist decides to like completely upend my script, which I welcome that, they're going to make it better and it's going to hit what my vision is, because I've at least given them what that vision is. Because it doesn't need to be, you don't have to have all 5 panels. There's been so many times where Xander surprised me where, I'll give him a page with 6 panels in it. He'll give me a 5-panel page, but it's better because he knows. I trust my artists to know that they know what they're doing with the art. But then also, I've given him all the description I need for him to know what's important and what we're trying to at least get across on this page. And so that ultimately leads to a greater collaboration, I think.
For sure. And yeah, that's ultimately, the crux of good collaboration is just trust. You know what you're doing. I trust you, you trust me. Let's jam and let's do this. And it's obvious on our discussion and with what I've seen so far, you guys deeply trust each other. It definitely seems to be paying off. Again, one more time, Cameraman looks great. Everyone should go check it out. This will be posting about roughly a week after we've recorded here, so you'll still have roughly 20 days to go back it. So please go back it. Get them to some. If for some crazy reason they're not at their goal, get them to that goal. If not, they're past it. Get them to some stretch goals. Get this book. I'm looking forward to reading it and checking it out. It looks like, again, art looks great. Love the vibe of everything. Love the story. And yeah, I can't wait to see what the book is when I read it and what comes next. So, gentlemen, thank you so much for coming on. Now is the time for you to let everybody know where they can find you on social media.
Go ahead, Xander.
I have a YouTube channel called Xander Flicks where I talk about things like Cameraman. I'm working on my own superhero stuff. And you can find me at Xander Flicks or Xander Arnot pretty much anywhere.
Andrew?
And then for me, I just joined Kara. I'm trying to just join all the social medias. I'm just making everybody sick and tired of me.
Collect them all. Yeah.
Yep. Got to catch them all. So I've got pretty much everything I'm on as at Aleams, ALEAMS. That's my handle for Instagram. Instagram, Twitter, Kara, Threads, Tumblr. I think I still have a Tumblr.
Friendster, MySpace.
Yep, Angel Fire.
Yeah.
All of them.
Awesome. Well, gentlemen, once again, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you so much.
Really appreciate it.